Hey guys, on my October 9th DVD update, where I talk about all the DVDs and Blu-rays I've gotten over the last, it's been about three and a half weeks, because as you know I was away in Louisiana for 2 weeks doing the news film for Sci-Fi. So when I got back about like a week and a few days ago, I was just playing catch-up, you know, watching as much as I could, and I got through a lot of stuff. I was pretty much like watching stuff like crazy. But I have a lot of really cool stuff to talk about, some really cool horror movies in this update. So this is a pretty cool one. Like I said, there's a lot of really cool stuff in this. The first one I got from Universal, and it's a Universal Classic Monsters collection. This is a very cool set. The thing with me in the Classic Monsters movies is, I remember going as a kid, probably like 5 years old, I wanted to watch horror movies and wasn't allowed to watch, you know, R-rated things, and really wasn't even allowed to watch PG-13 movies, but I wanted to see horror movies. Like, you know, as you guys know, I've always been into horror movies. It's always been what I like, my favorite types of films. And I remember like all these movies, renting every single one of these as a kid. These were pretty much the first, you know, when it comes to horror movies. This, and then I think I saw as a pretty young The Bad Seed. So I saw a lot of classic 40s, you know, 30s, 40s, and 50s horror films as a kid. Those were like pretty much my introduction to horror movies. And I didn't see, you know, things like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that until far later. A lot of that stuff I watched, you know, on Monster Vision and things like that. But these were always like personal favorites. I really loved them as a kid. And they cleaned these movies up so well. Like, especially I was looking at Creature of Black Lagoon. It's in 3D on this set, which is pretty cool. And the thing is, it's not the red and blue like the 3D that really gave me headaches. It's actually the Blu-ray 3D. So I don't even know exactly how that process works from, you know, turning it into that, but it looks really, you know, there's some really good sequences in it. It really looks good. So for this, you know, that's one of the things that's a major plus point if you love that film. The other films on the set are Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, The Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, which was another one that I remember watching a lot as a kid, The Phantom of the Opera, Creature from the Black Lagoon, like I said, and the, you know, 3D. And a lot of people have been going on about the packaging in this set, and I don't have a problem with the packaging. You know, they don't like how the discs are in here like this, and they say they're hard to get out. And I've had no problems with it. I think it's fine. You know, I think it's, you know, good packaging. You know, and as long as you're careful, as long as you're not like pulling at it like crazy and stuff, you'll be fine with them. But if you, you know, love the Universal Monster films, I don't think they've ever been released on Blu-ray. As far as I know, separately, I remember buying these probably like 2000, something like that. I remember there was a big push for these when they first put them out on DVD, or maybe the second times they were like, they had like special covers on them, and I remember when those first came out. But like I said though, if you're a fan of the Universal horror movies, these look great, and if you're wondering about the picture quality, like watching The Creature from the Black Lagoon, like now, it's amazing. It really looks like it was shot, you know, it looks new. Like, I don't know how it was cleaned up that well, especially the 3D, to see something like that. It makes you wonder that I guess they can put things like Friday the 13th 3D and all those things in Blu-ray 3D without having to use those terrible red and green glasses, which give me the worst headaches of my life. I can't stand them. I remember seeing Spy Kids 3D with those, which is like one of the only ones I ever saw in theaters like that. It was a nightmare. But this is definitely a must-have set. It also has a booklet in here with a bunch of, you know, title cards and things like that from the movies. Like I said though, if you're a fan of the monster sets, this is definitely one I would recommend picking up. Now, the next thing I got is from Warner Brothers. Now, this is a very cool Blu-ray. Just finished watching this with my brother. And it's Little Shop of Horrors, and it's the director's cut. Now, some of you may remember when this first came out on DVD, I think it was like 98, it was one of the early DVDs. I remember even back then, people on the DVD sites were talking about how it became so rare and was pulled from the shelves because it had, in black and white, the alternate director's cut ending, you know, which was the original kind of downbeat, very negative but amazing ending, which I couldn't believe how cool it was. But it had, you know, this ending in black and white, and it was rough. The sound effects weren't done. And for this edition, Warner Brothers has restored that original ending, which is so cool, and it's such a shame, they couldn't use it back then. But I understand, because like test audiences didn't respond well to it because it was a very negative ending. I mean, extremely negative, and people usually like movies to end happy. And I don't know, I really loved this, director's cut ending. This is definitely a must-have. I mean, they restored that ending so well. I think I only noticed one place where someone said something and there was no dialogue. I guess they couldn't find that little, like, one teeny piece. Besides that, like, it was perfect. But if you haven't seen the movie, it's with Rick Moranis, and it's a musical film directed by Frank Oz, who did, like, What About Bob and a bunch of things. But it's a movie about a Rick Moranis' character, who, I really wish Rick Moranis would come back in the movie again, but I know he's retired. But he works at a florist shop in Skid Row, and it's very, it's not doing very well, and he works there with this girl that he really likes, and she's dating this kind of greaser dentist played by Steve Martin, who's abusive, and she can't, she really, I don't know why she doesn't know why she's with him, but she kind of doesn't see herself very well. And, Rick Moranis goes out one day during the total eclipse and sees this flower, this weird plant that he's never seen, he doesn't know what it is, and buys it from this guy at this little shop on the side of the road, takes it back, and he tells his boss, well, I have an idea to, get business in here. I bought this really weird plant, and I think if we put it in the window, people are going to start coming in. So the boss is like, yeah, it's not, what are you talking about? He puts it in the window. Within a second, people start, piling in, and the place becomes a tourist destination because everybody wants to see this plant. But, as things are going very well, and the plant is starting to get sick, and, Rick Moranis' character is trying to figure out what to feed it. Nothing's working. He's doing everything he can think of. And it turns out the only thing that this plant can eat is blood. And, so it becomes him having to feed this plant. The plant gets bigger and bigger. Then the plant wants food. It wants actual people. And it becomes a whole thing with what happens. And John Candy plays a radio DJ in it. He's hilarious in this. And my favorite part of the whole movie is Bill Murray playing this kind of pervert going to the dentist that kind of gets off at pain at the dentist. Bill Murray that sequence is so funny. This is definitely one to check out. Like I said too, with this alternate ending, I couldn't believe, especially one specific shot. And I don't know, like if you've seen Chillerama, Adam Rifkin's Wadzilla segment, there's a segment in this alternate ending just like that, which was so cool. Definitely get this one. And the next one I got is Rock of Ages from Warner Brothers as well. And this is one that I was interested in seeing. Didn't see it in theaters. It's another musical as well. It's about a girl who's coming from a small town. I think it was like Ohio, or I don't remember where it was, but she was coming to Hollywood in hopes of becoming a star, music. She really wants to do music and wants to find a way to become a star as a singer. And she ends up getting a job at this sort of sleazy, kind of falling apart club. And, it's kind of got a vibe of Detroit Rock City, because outside of the club, Catherine Zeta-Jones is like, remember, this religious group that's trying to get the club out of there, and doesn't think it's, it's ungodly having a rock club, and they really want to get it out. So it has that same kind of vibe with Detroit Rock City with the Kiss aspect. And basically, she ends up getting a job there. First, she meets a guy that she starts to like, who works at the club, and that's how she gets the job there. She helps get the job for her. And the club is owned by Alec Baldwin and Russell Brand. And their stuff in the movie is some of my favorite stuff. They have these kind of weird scenes together, which I really thought were pretty funny. Tom Cruise plays the rocker who's kind of come to the club in hopes of trying to bring in enough money to save the place, because they, are in the point where if they don't pay their bills, the place is going to be auctioned off. So Tom Cruise is there, and his manager is played by Paul Giamatti, who's a real sleazy guy. And, Tom Cruise actually did pretty good as this character. I actually like when he plays these kind of different, just like when he did in Tropic Thunder, when he played that, crazy manager. But overall, though, I thought this was a pretty fun musical. I watched the extended cut, which is the R-rated cut. It didn't seem too, like, I didn't watch the original one, so I don't know. I know I think it's like 15 minutes difference, so I'm not totally sure what the changes were to it. But if you like musicals, and you like Russell Brand, and Alec Baldwin, those are my favorite parts of the movie. I thought this was a pretty fun one. The next one, now this is one that was funny when I was watching this. I have not seen this movie probably in like 20 years. And it was actually a movie one of those kind of movies, you know, I always was kind of thinking about, what was that? And, you know, because I saw it as a kid, but I never kind of remember what it was. So like, I always kind of remembered like a couple sequences, and it turns out it was Masters of the Universe, which is the He-Man film. And I remember as a kid in kindergarten, no, preschool, I think. I used to go to the after-school program. I used to always play with, like, they had all the He-Man toys, and like I always kind of wanted to take them, because it was like because I think they came out a little bit before me, so they kind of had them, so I couldn't find them. And this is back before eBay and things like that, so it was impossible to find them, or they had them at flea markets, extremely expensive. So I used to always think about, was there any way that I could take that home? Any way I could get that? But I remember that, but the movie is about He-Man and, you know, him and the group of people. I don't know all the names very well, but the group of people that are with him, and he ends up meeting this troll character who's played by the voice of Figment in the original Imagination ride at Epcot, before Epcot had to change it around. And that ride is like the perfect example of like a totally destroyed ride. Because originally it was like, you know, I don't want to go into the whole thing, but he did that imagination. But like, I kept thinking of that watching this. Like, so I actually got to go on that ride once before they changed it. Then I went back the next year and it was all changed around. But he ends up, the troll character in this movie has this invention that he made where you can go to, you know, basically a time machine, but you can actually go to any time, in the future, in the past. And Skeletor, who's the villain in this movie, ends up wanting to get his hands on this thing, and, you know, he ends up coming after the troll and He-Man and everything to get it. Then they end up escaping and going into the future, into the past in like 1987 or something. And the main cop in the movie, which is, I really love this actor, is the guy who played the principal in Back to the Future, the Slackers. He was also in Problem Child 2, the guy who, you know, ran to the bathroom and ended up having the toilet explode on him because of the bomb. But, you know, he was in this, and it was all them, you know, there, and then Skeletor and the people in the future coming back to try and get them. It also has Courtney Cox, and I didn't even know she was acting back in the 80s. For some reason I thought she came around like right around when Friends was. For some reason I just never knew she was acting back then. But this really was a fun movie. I really liked this a lot more. Like I said, I never really saw He-Man. I was kind of a little bit before my time, just a little bit. I was more like Ninja Turtles and things like that. But I did see this movie when it came out, though, and this is a really fun one. And the next one I got is Eating Raoul from the Criterion Collection. This is a very quirky movie they created for Criterion, and I was really glad they put this out because they really cleaned this movie up great. And it has some really pretty good features on this too. Now the movie is about, you know, Paul Buttrell and Mary Woodrow, who they did a lot of the Roger Corman films together, always playing teams in the movies. You know, like always, you know, together. They were in Chopping Mall in the beginning. They were in a bunch of stuff together. I always thought they were great together. And in this, they play a couple that really wants to buy and start their own restaurant out in the country. That's their dream. And Paul Buttrell wants to be there and selling these expensive wines. And they have the whole plan. But they don't have the money to put down for the down payment. They can't get a loan. Nothing is working. They don't know what they're going to do. At one point, they accidentally end up killing a swinger who was in the house. In the apartment building. He's in one of the rooms nearby, ends up coming in, trying to, you know, basically rape the wife. They end up killing him. Then they come up with this idea of the wife putting an ad in the paper as basically a prostitute. And people come to the house and come to the apartment. The plan is the husband to hit him over the head, and they end up taking their money. And hopefully, you know, soon they'll have enough money to put down the down payment on the restaurant. But then there's a robber that ends up scamming them, you know, putting locks on the doors and things like that. He ends up coming in that night to rob them and ends up, you know, discovering what they're doing. So he ends up basically blackmailing them and forcing them so they can work together. And he's like, well, I can get you more money. I have somebody that I can sell these bodies to. He doesn't tell him what he's doing with the bodies, but he can get them like $300 or $400. So it becomes like a very successful business. I'm not going to say anything more with what happens with this, but it's a very fun, quirky, weird movie. This is one I really have liked a lot. Like I said, I saw this movie years ago, and I watch this one occasionally all the time. The next one is an absolute like must-own from Paramount, and it's Stephen King's Pet Sematary. Now I will say I do hope they put out the sequel on Blu-ray as well. I like the sequel pretty much just about as much. You know, I like Eddie Furlong in it. I like the actor, you know, played Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob, who's in it, and he was also in Carnival and lots of movies. But this one is about a family that moves to a new house, and it's a perfect, very nice house, but it's on this huge road. They have a little kid there, and he's played by the kid who was in Full House, and he was in the Kindergarten Cop. He's like the kid who has that famous line in Kindergarten Cop. It's like, boys have penises, girls have vaginas. And then Arnold Schwarzenegger's like, thanks for the tip. You know, that kid. He plays the Gabe in this movie. And Fred Gwynne, you know, from the Munsters, who played Herman Munster, is the neighbor. And Fred Gwynne, his performance is outstanding in this. He was so good. And I wish he would have done some, you know, more movies and would have been able to get more film work. And I know he kind of wasn't able to get as much stuff he was in life because people always kept thinking of him as Herman Munster. And this movie, I think, really made people think of him differently. And he's the next door neighbor that they get along very well with. And the one day they're out there playing, and the kid ends up wandering out into the road and gets killed by a truck. And it becomes very depressing, and, you know, the whole family is broken up from it. And Fred Gwynne told him, you know, the new owners, or, you know, the husband earlier in the movie about this Indian burial ground behind the pet cemetery, because the pet cemetery right by the house, right behind it is this Indian burial ground, and about how things can come back. And they end up bringing the kid back to life in this burial ground, and this, you know, what happens is just horrible. What, you know, this is a must-have. You know, this is a really good, if you like Stephen King's movies, this is one of my personal favorite ones. The next one, this one's a movie that a lot of people have asked me about. It's from Lionsgate, and it's The Cabin in the Woods. And this is one that's very difficult to talk about because you can't really say too much without ruining it. All I can say is, you know, and you kind of know this from the trailer, is that there's a group of people that are kind of controlling everything that's happening to these people. And you see that in the trailer, and the people from it is the one guy from Let Me In and Step Brothers, the father, and the one who plays the villain in Billy Madison, and he's in lots of TV and things like that. He was really good in this. But it's a group of these kids going, you know, basically just to a cabin. And it's kind of like, you know, takes apart the typical movie about people going to a cabin, going out to the woods, and what happens, all that kind of stuff. And it kind of turns it upside down and has an interesting take of, you know, everything that's happening is being controlled by a group of these people. And it makes it's very different. And I like, you know, the end is very cool, but there's not too much to say about it because you can't give away what happens and what, you know, the way things happen. But I will say they get there and things start going bad, and there are things after them, and it becomes a slasher film. But you know, you see it so differently because you see these people controlling it and watching it. Kind of has a vibe of Stay Tuned, you know, like the hell scenes when they're down there watching what's going on the TV. It has that kind of vibe to it. The next one is from E1. This is a very interesting movie. I really ended up liking this a lot, and it's called The Iron Sky. And it's a movie about, you know, I think people have talked about this in the past kind of as a joke, like all the Nazis, you know, left the Earth and went to the dark side of the moon. And in this movie, it starts off with basically Sarah Palin's character became, you know, Sarah Palin became president in the future. And it's kind of a joke. They never say her name because I don't think they would be allowed to, but you can tell that's who it's supposed to be. And she ends up sending two guys to the moon. And she ends up basically wanting them to put like a vote for Sarah Palin thing on the moon. They end up getting there, and right when they get there, the one guy gets shot and captured by Nazis. And Nazis have a base, like a whole huge base, and you know, like everyone's basically like thousands of people living there on the moon. And they end up taking hostage the one guy, and they don't understand what he is. And the guy's an African American, and they don't even understand that because most of the people, and pretty much all of them, have just been there because they're not that old. So most of them are, you know, in their 30s and 40s. So they weren't really, you know, they never were on Earth. So they were all kind of taken aback by it. And That's the main idea, and they want to go to Earth with the astronaut. They want to go there and take over the the Earth, and basically because they kind of think that war is still going on there, and they don't really know what happened. It's a very fun, quirky, weird film, and Udo Kier is great in it. I really found myself liking this a lot. The next one is from Millennium, and it's Red Lights. This is one that I was really interested to see. Susan Olsen's in it, and Cillian Murphy, from 28 Days Later, and, Batman Begins, and the newest Dark Knight Rises. He has a little part in that. And Sigourney Weaver's in it, and it's about him and Sigourney Weaver playing these characters that they basically kind of look for fraud in people who say they're psychics, or say that they've seen ghost phenomenons, and they can the kind of people who are like healers, or those religious type characters who say they can touch you and like take the sickness. So it's them basically trying to get to the bottom of these things and debunk it. And it's interesting the stuff they were doing. They were showing one of the guys who was a healer, and how he has an earpiece, and I kind of knew a lot of that, but how there's someone in the other area talking to him and telling him, go this way, Susan, something's that way, look, go to your left. And right on the way in, they have plants out there that are like people that are talking to get answers from people and things like that. But the main concept of this is I forgot for a second. It's Robert De Niro's character, who plays this very successful, he's kind of like a Chris Angel almost. He does a lot of different things. He can he's blind and has all these different abilities to be psychic. He's basically can do everything. And they're trying to investigate him. And, he's the kind of person they tried to investigate years ago. They couldn't debunk him and, prove that he wasn't real, legit. And they're trying it again. And when they start doing this, things start to go very bad. And things start to get very bad for both of the Sigourney Weaver and Cillian Murphy's character. And that's the main thing. And the payoff to this movie was, there's a little bit of slow parts in this movie, but the payoff was really good. And the acting was really good. And Cillian Murphy was great in it. The next ones are titles from Redemption, and it's Jess Franco's Exorcism, and this is basically about this kind of writer who writes this column, and he has this kind of weird group that basically for rich people, where he puts on exorcisms and sacrifices that are fake, just actors, for these people to watch, and and then they have these orgies and stuff afterwards. But there's this the place where he writes is this priest who comes in and contributes stories and stuff to it. And he was a priest and was removed from the priesthood for something that he did. You never really know what he did exactly, but something happened. And he ends up getting wind of this thing, and he kind of gets an idea that these people really are possessed. So he, stumbles into where this place is and watches the thing happen. You see him peeking, and he ends up going and killing off one by one the people who are there. So all the women, he, says all this stuff like, oh, I'm cleansing your soul and all that. So he basically thinks that this is all a legit thing, and these people are all possessed by the demons and things like that. And that's the main concept to it. It was a very fun one. The next one is Female Vampire. This one is a bit hard to explain, though. But it's about a woman who's this countess, and she kind of lives in this castle, and people start dying off. She ends up killing this one guy in a sex act, because these are all erotic films. And there's two different versions too, which is interesting. The one version, they're have clothes on, the other one they don't, and certain things. It's really weird how I don't know where the the censored version was made for exactly. But it's an interesting thing. But she's killing off these people, and then there's an ongoing investigation. The cop is actually the same guy who played the priest in the other one. This one, I didn't love this one as much as the other one, but it was a pretty good one. There's not a whole lot to say about it because it was kind of confusing what was going on. But it was basically if she talked to this one woman who was interviewing her about being a countess and stuff, and then that woman kind of becomes infatuated with her and can't stop thinking about her, and that's basically the main thing to this. The next one is Lon Chaney in The Penalty. And I remember seeing clips of this at the horror makeup show talking about him bounding his legs back. And this is a pretty interesting one. Lon Chaney put his, like, bound his legs behind his back to make it look like he had his his legs amputated. But the movie is about, sorry if I'm sweating, it's just getting hot in here, but it's about, and I can't put the air on right there. I know I said that a lot though, but he basically, as a kid, ended up getting a concussion, and these two doctors, one of them thought that he had to amputate his legs in order to save him. The other doctor is screaming at the guy, "Why did you do that?" This is a silent film too, so it's just the text, and he's going, "Why did you do that? You crippled this boy for life." And the kid ends up hearing this, and the parents come in, and like, he's crying to him, going, they said this was a mistake, they weren't supposed to do this, and the doctors are denying it and covering it up, going, "Oh, this is just his concussion speaking." So years later, I think it's like 25 years later, he's a bitter, very mean-spirited person. He owns this nightclub, and if people end up like leaving his club or things like that, he ends up having this kind of minion that kills them, and he ends up having like his favorite girl, and favorite girl lives in his house, and he kind of locks him in, and he has this kind of plan of taking over the city. It's a very cool one, shot very well, and they cleaned it up very well for as old as this is, and they did like a lot of cool color tinting, so it's like kind of greenish, since it is black and white, so like there's certain scenes that are kind of reddish, greenish, and things like that. The next one from Fox is called the Do-Deca-Pentathlon. I don't know how to say it. I didn't love this one too much. I was interested in seeing it though, because it's the director of Jeff Who Lives at Home, and Jeff Who Lives at Home is one that sorry, I'm just making sure I'm staying in the right spot. Jeff Who Lives at Home is one that I really did like a lot. This one, I didn't like this too much. It was okay. I just really didn't love it. It was basically these two brothers that as a kid had this competition, having these certain kind of events, sporting things and all these different types of things like go-kart racing and things like that, and they would see who won the event, and it ended up being in a draw, and never was a winner, so they always were kind of upset about the fact that they never had a winner, and they never really got along since. So this is years later, them trying to, they're married now with kids and things like that, and they're trying to do it again, have the event now, and finally having a winner, and it's okay. I didn't love it. The next one is from PBS, and it's Downtown Abbey. Started watching this. It's from the writer of Gosford Park. It's a very interesting one. It's basically about this huge estate and all the people that work there, and it's kind of headed by Maggie Smith, from the Secret Garden and Titanic and lots of stuff. And just all the people that are working with her and all the kinds of problems and things like that. It's an interesting one though. Like I said, I haven't watched too much, and so I can't say a whole lot about it, but it's shot very well though. Now on to the DVDs, and a lot of these are horror, so there's a lot of horror ones. This one's from E1, and it's a David Arquette film called The Cottage. And this one, I really found myself liking this, and it's about this family. They have like a really nice house, and they have a kind of like a guest house cottage out back, and the person who is renting it out, the sister comes and says, "Oh, my sister was in a horrible accident, she's in the hospital, so she has to leave, and we have to get all of her stuff, and she's not going to be able to come back to the cottage, where she was living there." So they end up, she ends up leaving, and they rely on that money to keep, to live, because it's like, that's basically the money for living the month. So they end up having to find someone to take over, and David Arquette's character ends up like living there, and he's a writer who writes like erotic novels and things like that, and he's, seems like a nice guy, and things become very, very weird with him. And David Arquette, I like David Arquette in this. He was kind of, in some points, playing a little bit himself, because, if you watch interviews with and things like that with him, he has that kind of interesting laugh, and that kind of weird laugh, and I've never really heard him do that really in many movies. In this one, he was sort of doing it, and he was sort of just almost like David Arquette is David Arquette. Then it was a little bit different. But, things start to get weird, and he starts to become, like, going into their house and kind of, making inappropriate comments about their teenage daughter and all these kind of things. And the eventual, what ends up happening in this, I really thought was pretty good and really weird, especially how it wraps up. I like this one. I like David Arquette in this. This is definitely, for a David Arquette film, this is one of my favorite things he's done, probably next to Ravenous. You know, he was really good in Scream, but I'm talking more about ones that were a little different for him. And like Ravenous was one that I thought he was really good in. This one is like totally, he's like the main character, and I like this a lot with him. The next one is called Patient Zero, and I was really interested in seeing this because Amanda Phillips, there's no relation, but she was in Haunted High, which I was in, and she played Danny Trejo's daughter in the film. And it also stars Jackie Hall, who's just like an actress that I talked to, and she's in the film as well. And it's about these people that work at like a medical testing facility, and it kind of has a little bit of like a Return of the Living Dead 3 vibe, you know, with like the medical testing facility. And in there, they end up having a you know, there's something going on. They're doing kind of medical tests and stuff like that. And, you know, you hear the alarm go off, and the place ends up getting shut down, you know, so no one can get in, no one can get out. And then there's basically zombies in the place, and, you know, people are getting killed off one by one. There's some really cool sequence in this. I thought it was very well shot, very well acted. I really thought, too, you know, I wish some of the characters would have lived a little bit longer, and they would have done a couple things differently. Like the two characters that I really like were Jackie Hall's character and the character who played her father. It always sucks, you know, when the characters you really like end up dying off like in the beginning. That's like one of the only things like it was always kind of a shame about it. I like the sequence too when they were crawling up these kind of tunnel things in the movie. This was a really pretty cool one, you know, for a little bit of a different zombie outbreak film. You know, and like I said, it kind of Return of the Living Dead 3 kind of vibe, you know, like the end of Return of the Living Dead 3. You know, I thought this was a really pretty fun one. The next one, and this is one that I was really interested in seeing for a long time. I saw the trailer a while ago, and it's an anthology film called Scary or Die. And there's a bunch of different segments. My two favorite ones was the first one with Bill Osberts Jr., you know, who was in the Abraham Lincoln versus the Zombies, the Asylum one, and he's been in lots of stuff. And it was basically, him and his friend, you know, there were these terrible guys that were going to the border where people would cross to Mexico, and he was killing them. And he's there, and like there's this weird concoction that his friend is drinking. He ends up spilling it, and it brings up the dead, because basically he kills people there and buries them, and they end up coming back. So it's these zombies that are like after him, you know, that are Mexican zombies. It was really pretty interesting, the whole concept. And the other one was about, that I really liked, was about this clown, and it was Corbin Bleu, who, you know, was in High School Musical, and he's actually really pretty good. And he was also in that Flight 92 Down. I remember watching that years back on like Noggin or something. And it's basically about this clown that comes to a birthday party. And I realized the clown, I was in a movie with him called David Sterling movie, but he was in Vampire Club. He was a nice guy, and he played the clown in the movie. I forget what his exact name was, but I knew who it was when I was looking at the credits. Like I can't pronounce it. Certain names I can't pronounce right. But it's this clown, and he ends up biting Corbin Bleu's character at this birthday party. And from the bite, Corbin Bleu starts to like transform into this crazy, deranged clown. And it's very sad. You know, it's a very sad, it's not really as much horror as it is just sort of depressing what's happening to him, because he's a really likable character in this segment, and what's going on is really sad. The other segment in there was like about a guy that saves a woman who was going to be killed, and the other one was about this guy having a body in the trunk. It definitely has a creep show kind of vibe to it. You know, for you know, anthology films, this really was one of the better ones that I've seen in a long time. And I said this is one that I'm definitely going to watch a lot. Like to me, is one of the ones that's going to live on. And the next one from IFC is Asylum Blackout. This is another one I was really interested in watching. It's about a group of these people that work as cooks in a mental institution. And, you know, they also have this band they're in. They're kind of having arguments with each other about the band. And, you know, they're not really getting along too well. And the one guy is very depressed about working there. And kind of the band isn't really going where he wants. And the guy who's the head of the security there is like, you got to come in here tomorrow morning at 6 for a meat delivery. So he's in there the next day. Something weird is about it. There's like something weird about the meat guy. But they end up the next evening because he had to get up so early, he's exhausted, and they're all cooking the food for the people, the patients and stuff like that, and he ends up going to sleep because they're like, oh, listen, we'll get the dinner prepped, you go take a nap. He ends up waking up, and all the power has gone out in the asylum, and all hell is starting to break loose, and the cop there who's like head of the place, the security is like, can you guys help take the patients back to their rooms? They trust you. They're not going to listen to me, and basically things start to go awry, and the patients go crazy because they're not on their meds, and they're killing everybody, and it's very brutal and intense with them trying to stay alive. There's a great sequence with one guy who's locks himself in the meat locker, and them all trying to break in, and he's crying in there. This is a really pretty good one. And, if you like movies and nut houses and things like that, and people, trying to hide and stuff, this was a good one. Now the next one, this one is really upsetting because it was such a good movie. I really loved this. But an aspect of the movie to me, and I think to a lot of people who are Bill Moseley fans, an aspect of this movie is going to fail, and fail so bad that it's not even funny. And I hate to have to say that, but I don't think it's going to happen to everybody. I don't know if everyone is going to take this and pick up on something so early and be like, oh. And it's like I said, the movie is so good. I really love the movie, and I just hate that this, had to get ruined. But it's about a a couple, and the husband's, out there at the house with his son. The son's out playing, and he ends up getting kidnapped by Bill Moseley. And Bill Moseley is crazy as fuck in this. And I loved, what he did in it. And he ends up, putting on, women's makeup, and he's, going, yeah, Daddy, listen to what Mommy says. He's, doing, that, what Bill Moseley does best, that crazy, Otis type screaming that he does. Like I said, I've always been a fan of Bill Moseley. I like what he does. I really like Bill Moseley. And he ends up getting caught for what he did, and the parents are really hoping he's going to get life in jail with no chance of parole, or be put to death. He ends up getting 30 years to life, which is what the parents are dreading, because with that sentence, he could be out in as little as 5 years for good behavior. So they end up coming up with a plan to kill and torture Bill Moseley's character. So they end up putting together this plan of following the cops that are transporting Bill Moseley to the jail, and and I'm not going to say any more what happens with it, but it involves them torturing him and things like that. But like I said, it's a great movie, and I'm not saying anything about the movie, as not being good. What I'm saying is, it's just a shame that something, to me, I had to figure it out, and it had to fail to me so bad. And it was just, I think maybe with a different actor it wouldn't happen. And no, Bill Moseley was outstanding, so I'm not saying anything like that. When you watch it, most of you will probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, like I said, this is a really good one, but just upsetting what happened. The next one is a Michael Rooker film. Michael Rooker stars in it, and it's from Dark Sky Films, and it's Hypothermia. And it's about Michael Rooker and his family, and he's there with his son. He's really excited to be, with his son, because his son is just graduating from college, and he's there with his girlfriend, and they're going ice fishing, and the wife's there along too, and it's going to be a big family thing, because the son is going to leave right after this is over and go to the Peace Corps with the girlfriend, and they're going to be away for 2 or 3 years. So this is their big trip together, right before this happens. And they're out there ice fishing, and they start noticing something weird going on underneath the ice. And it's one of those kind of movies about a creature under there, and what ends up happening, the creature is a little bit like the creature of the Black Lagoon kind of look. It was a pretty good one, though. I liked Michael Rooker is always good. He's best known, I think of him most from Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer and Mallrats. And if you like Michael Rooker, he's not in a small part, he's the main character, and it's him, and all the things that are happening to his family, and it is a very good one. And the next one from Lionsgate I got is Seance the Summoning, and this is about a group of these friends that are going to they're like making this film, and they want to go to this, like, the one guy works at this morgue, and the one girl has basically become a born-again Christian. The other one believes that she has the ability to, like, talk with the dead. So they're there to try and, you know, use the Ouija board in contact with the spirit. And it's basically what ends up happening to them there. And, you know, one of the friends ends up getting possessed and going crazy, and he's after the one. I thought this one was okay. Not a perfect movie, but for those kind of things, you know, about that kind of aspects and things like that, it wasn't bad. The next one, and this was a pretty good one. It was shot, I think, in like one of the islands, and it really had pretty good production values. And it's a different type of a Bigfoot movie, because it's not just like one Bigfoot, it's like a whole bunch of Bigfoots. And it's called After Dusk They Come. It's about a bunch of people that end up on this island because the boat they're on ends up sinking. And they all, you know, end up on this island, and it's them there, and you know, having all kinds of arguments, and they're getting, you know, killed off by these Bigfoot characters. Like I said, it had really good production value. I thought like they didn't in some points use like the location, like some stuff I thought that they should have used in the location, and it kind of just looked like it was like Los Angeles, even though it wasn't, because like they didn't use certain spots to it that I think would have made it a little cooler. But it was a different Bigfoot movie. There really hasn't been too many Bigfoot movies with a bunch of different Bigfoots and on an island. And also the Bigfoots are like kind of skinny and different looking. Almost more human looking. This was an interesting one though. The next one, and this is another one, possession movie from Inception. This one, I didn't love this one. I really didn't like this. You know, it comes across like almost sort of silly in a little bit. And it's called Back from Hell. And, you know, I always try and find something good about a movie. And, you know, I don't like saying lots of bad stuff about movies. I just kind of like, I'm not that kind of person. Never really have been. But I didn't love this. It's an Italian film. I think they should have done it in Italian. The actors in it, you could tell, because it said dialogue coach, you could tell that they really didn't know what they were saying because they were speaking English in it. Like, some of them you could tell knew English very well. Other ones were like having a hell of a time with it. And it was coming across ridiculous. But it's all done with the one guy filming their trip. And it also is confusing, because I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. They end up, like, they're supposed to, I guess, be college kids, but then they end up looking like they're in their late 30s. So I couldn't tell exactly what was going on with them. But they were, like, way too old to be talking the way they were. So that kind of added to the strangeness. But this is almost in the level of Troll 2. You know, I can compare it to that kind of a vibe. But not that great, though. And they end up, you know, they end up staying in this sort of church, and the one area over there is like the priest, but then they're like staying like in the church, but then they have to stay in the, you know, boys in one room, girls on the other side. It's really weird. Like, who would take a trip and like purposely want to do all that? And they're there, like, you know, and screwing around the Ouija board, and then the one guy gets possessed. He's like doing this when he's possessed, and I don't know. But it's Back from Hell from Inception. Like I said, it's just not a perfect movie by any, you know. And the next one is from a new company called Uncorked. And I was really interested in seeing this. I think it's going to be in Redbox now. And it's called No Tell Motel. This is another one, group of kids in a camper that are going, I don't know where they were going exactly, but they end up in a accident, end up flipping the camper. But the movie starts, though, with this kind of, you know, mom and pop hotel, and, you know, it looks like real together. And the one girl is swinging. She ends up going into the street because she sees like a little animal or something, ends up getting killed by a car. And from that happening, the parents and stuff, you know, the hotel gets dilapidated. So then it cuts to the kids, you know, and they have their accident. And, you know, right where the accident is right where this hotel is. So they end up going into this motel, and things are very bad there. And they're seeing, like, you know, they're basically seeing what happened to people there. And also what happened to people there is in turn happening to them. So one guy's, like, cutting their wrist. That ends up happening to the character. And the one character is like addicted to drugs, and he's like, and which was a different aspect. You don't see a lot of horror movies where like the guy's like injecting himself with needles and stuff, and he's like having all kinds of drug problems and stuff. And there's all this stuff too with this little girl that's like wandering around and kind of encouraging the people to kill themselves or do these bad things to themselves. And there's also stuff from the past about what the parents of that little girl were doing, and like what the father was doing to the wife, and it's a pretty crazy one. And the next one, the last one I got, oh, I have two other things. It's a Tunes to Go from Mill Creek, and it's got a bunch of different things in here. It's got Richard Scarry, which I watched, you know, when I was like probably 10 or something. The Littles, Heathcliff, a whole bunch of different ones on here. It's a very cool set, and it's in, and that's what I liked about it. It's in this kind of like CD case or something. I've never seen anything in this kind of thing. So they're in like this thing. It's interesting kind of, you know, packaging for it. But the last thing I got, and this is from Michael Ray Bauer sent, and he made a Blu-ray of season 1 and 2 that he signed to Salute Your Shorts. So definitely check out Michael Bauer and HeyBauer.com. He's a very cool guy. I ended up meeting him at the Kamikaze convention, and he said he was going to send me a Blu-ray with the episodes. So anyway, though, thanks a lot for watching. I think this was a long update. I don't know how long this is going to end up being, but I had a lot to talk about. The next update's probably going to be like 2 weeks or less. I'm going to try, you know, right now that I'm back, I'm going to be way more together and not going to have periods of time when I have so much more to watch. And I still have a whole ton of stuff to show, but it'll be in the next updates. Anyway, though, thanks a lot for watching, for subscribing, and I'll see you guys later.